practicals, we will look into object-oriented programming. So we already have seen the concept of classes and objects. In order to create any object, we need an object factory. We need a blueprint of that object, and that object factory, that blueprint is a class. So in Python, in order to create a class, we have to call the class keyword followed by any name you can give it. So I am giving the name called demo, or let me make a class called health. So health is the name of the class and colon. And it is a notation that the first letter of the class is capital. It is not necessary, like you will not get any error if you make it small, but it is a standard followed and we have to stick with this standard. These are like coding practices. Now the idea is that we know that what is an object? Object is a real world entity which contains states and behavior. So state is the property, and that property is stored in some variable. And we have seen there are two types of variables, the class variable and the object variable. The class variable and the instance variable. So instance variable we always define inside the constructor. And what is a constructor? Constructor is a special type of function. In Python, constructor is a special type of function which automatically gets called whenever a new object is created. Whenever we create a new object, constructor will automatically get called. So I am writing the constructor in Python. The syntax to write the constructor is something like this: double underscore init, double underscore. Then this self is very important. This self represents the calling object. Whenever I create an object, this constructor is called, and this constructor is called that for that newly created object. And this self represents the newly created object. And here I will be passing the parameters. So these are the variables or the properties of the object. So the object which we will be creating, it will be having a name, it will be having an age, and it will be having a location. It will be having a location. Or let it have gender. It's fine. Like we are just trying to understand the syntax, it's fine. You can take it anyway. Now what I have done until now, I have created one constructor. So now let me prove that whenever I create an object, this constructor will get called. Let us do it. Now I just have created a small class which contains only the constructor. Inside the constructor, I have defined the object variables or instance variables. So name, age, gender, these are the variables belonging to the object. Now, if I make the object, how to make the object, name of the class, round bracket, and the parameters. So here the parameter is name. Any name I can give. Age, I can give anything. Gender, I can give like this. So H1 is the reference variable or name of the newly created object. So let me first run this. So initially it will take some time to run. Yeah. Let us run this. And you see, whenever I create a new object, see this function is called, like this print constructor called. It means that we got inside this function. That is why this called now. And we prove that whenever a new object is created, constructor is called, automatically it is called. And when the constructor is called, the newly created object which I had its name, age, and gender got initialized. So the newly created object which I have, its name is David, its age is 31, and its gender is M. And I can verify that. If I print h1.name, so you can see that the h1, the newly created object, its name got. So similarly, we can get all the properties of it. So this is how we create an object. So the idea is very clear in object-oriented programming in Python. First create a class, then straight away create a constructor. The syntax is double underscore init double underscore. And the parameter of first argument should be the self keyword. Self represents the object which is being called. And now we know that object has both state and behavior. And what is the behavior? Behavior is defined by the functions. So in the class, we can have n number of functions. In the class, we can define n number of functions. So in the class, we are defining a function that is print info. And always remember, in the class, whatever function you define, we call it the method. What is method? Method is basically a function inside the class. So the class functions inside the class, we call them methods. So print info is a method, and the first argument of the method is always the self keyword, because this self represents the object which is calling this method, and object which is calling this method, its name, age, and gender will get printed. So now I have already created h1 object. I will just call this method, this functionality of this object, and what this functionality will do, round bracket. What this functionality will do? Okay, I have to first run this. But whenever I make any change, I have to run it. Let me once again create the object, and let us straight away call that. So you can see that. So here what has happened is, I was able to call this print info function of h1 object print info. And self.name, it means the newly created object, its name I print, then its age and its gender I was able to print. So this is how it works. Now we will discuss one more concept of class variables.
One doubt I have. Without using the constructor, can't we use directly the method of print info?
Okay. So see, always remember in Python, if you are creating a object variable, then constructor is compulsory.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you why. That is what we will be discussing now. Now, what I am trying to do is, okay, as per your question, which is a genuine question, what if I don't use any constructor and directly I just define a variable like counter is equal to 0? Then this variable is a class variable and it's not a object variable. So what is the difference? Let us try. So what is the difference between a class variable and an object variable? That we have to discuss. Let us. Class variable versus object variable. So see, the idea is very simple, that if I have an object variables inside the constructor like this, name, age, and gender, these are the object variables. So every time I create an object, a separate copy will be created of these variables. Let us suppose I created 3 objects of class health. So name, age, and gender got created. And once again, name, age, and gender will get. And once again, like for every object, a separate copy of these variables will get. It means that whatever age I will fill here, it is independent of this. Because everybody is having a separate copy, they can fill whatever data they want to fill. They are free to do that. Separate copy. They are free to do that. Separate copy. Okay. But with the class variable, like if counter is a class variable, then what will happen is all the objects will share this variable. So all the objects, there is only one copy of a class variable. And all the objects have to share that class variable. And if I update the class variable, that update will be reflected to all the objects. So class variable is something like a public property, and object variable is just like a private property. Now I will demonstrate its working. Now inside the constructor, and how to access the class variable, name of the class dot variable. Very important. To access the class variable, name class name dot class variable. Class name dot class variable. Class name dot class variable. This is the syntax. So what I did, health dot counter plus is equal to 1. So health, I am incrementing the counter by, and then I will also print the value of the counter. And when I'm printing the value of the counter, I will not be using self, because counter is not a private property. Counter is not the variable of the object, but counter is the variable of the class. So no self. I have to use the class name. Now let us see what will happen. Now I will create multiple objects. H1, I will create the object. Then I will run the info, print info method. Okay. I should first run this. Then once again, let me create the object. Okay, so health counter is 1. Now I will create another object, H2. And I will do the H2.printInfo. And as you can see, we have two. Like the counter, it became two. Why it became two? Because first time when I called the function, like when I created the object, constructor got called first time. And when the first time constructor got called, it made the counter to one. It was zero, it made the counter. And second time, whenever once again a new object is created, constructor will be called and it will make the counter two. Because counter was one, it became two. And when I'm printing the info, I'm printing the value of the counter, it is two. Because counter is common to all the objects. There is only one copy of counter, and if I do any changes with the counter, I am changing the original copy itself, and I am using the original copy everywhere. So this is the difference between the class variable and the object variable. Only one copy of the class variable is created, and which is being used everywhere. And whatever updation I will do, that updation will be done there, and it will be reflected everywhere. But object variable, every object will have its own copy, and whatever changes the object will do, it will be reflected only to the object. Outside world is independent of that. Other objects are independent of those changes. So this is the idea. Now, one more thing we can discuss related to class and class variable and object variable, and we also call it like data variable, data attribute, class attribute. H1 dot name is H2 dot name. Now I know that name is a object variable. So false. It has to be false because H1 dot name is different from H2 dot name. Why different? Separate copy. H1 dot name is the name variable of H1 object, and H2 dot name is the name variable of the H2 object, and these both name variables are different. They are referring to different memory blocks. They are referring to different memory blocks. But if I write something like this, H1 dot counter is H2 dot counter. Now you will get true. Why you will get true? Because counter is same. Only single copy of counter is there. So counter is same for all. Counter is same for all. Only single copy of counter is there. And it is same for all. So H1 dot counter is H2 dot counter. Okay. Now we will discuss one more concept of access modifiers. Concept of access modifiers. So we have already seen in the theory class that we have public, we have private, and we have protected as the access modifiers. Protected means single underscore and private means double underscore. Like we will demonstrate it. So now I am creating a class student, and this class student is having a class variable that is the counter, and it is having a constructor in which I am taking the name, age, and gender. And I am also implementing the counter. And along with that, I am assigning a protected variable roll number. Like single underscore I am using. and this roll number will be given based on the counter. So let us suppose initial few digits are same. Like A, B, C, D. Then what I will do, I will concatenate this with a counter. This is clear to us. Then what I will do, I will assign one private variable. Private variable means double underscore. And I will call it something very secret related to student. I will call it like secret number or any ID number which is secret to student, which is private to student, and I am giving it a value like something just for understanding purpose. And I am making one info function, print info function, that will simply print all the information. It will also print the roll number and it will also print the what you say that the private ID. Now see, now one very interesting demonstration we will do. Now I will create an object. I will create S1 student is equal to student. And once again, I will pass these parameters and I will run. Okay, let me run. Okay, I have to convert it into the string. Because counter is an integer variable, we cannot concatenate an integer with a string. We cannot concatenate an integer with a string. Okay, now let me print the info. And okay, and let me try to access the element separately. Let me try to access name and also let me try to access the ID. Okay, it is rolling. I will demonstrate what I am trying to do. So this yeah. So see why I am not able to access this ID. Okay. But once again, I am telling you what I did. I have a class student. Inside the student, I have a counter variable, which is a class variable. Then we have a constructor. Inside, we know that the first argument of all the methods inside the class has to be the self keyword. Then some parameters it is taking. Then we are assigning the object variables or instance variables. So name, age, gender, and I am incrementing the counter. All these are public variables, like their scope is public. And if I am using single underscore, it means it is a protected variable. Roll number is a protected variable. And this ID, it is a private variable. So double underscore is. Now inside the print info, now print info is a public method. Print info is a public method. And inside that, I am just printing all the information, or I'm printing all the information of the object, like the name, age, gender, roll number, and ID. Now I am creating an object. You know that whenever we create an object, constructor is called. And when the constructor is called, all this will get executed one by one. So initialization will be done. And when I am printing the print info I can call because it's a public method. Public method is open to the world. Public method can be accessed by anybody. Anybody can access the public method. So s1.printinfo, that is a public method that I am calling. And interestingly, through this public method, I was able to steal the private information because this ID is private. I made it private, but despite of that, I was able to get this information. This is a kind of a security leak. So the learning from here, like we will discuss that in upcoming sessions in some good detail, how to avoid these kind of leaks. Because what is the purpose of making anything private? To hide it from the outside world. But here, I was so easily able to get that data. And why I was able to get that data? Because of this public method. Because any method, like see inside this class, whatever method is there, that those method can access private properties also, public properties also. So you consider this class as an organization. All the secrets of the organizations, it might be floating within the organization. All the employees working in an organization knows those secrets. So these secrets are accessible by these functions. Now when these functions are being called, so those employees, if somebody forces them outside, then they will reveal those secrets. And that is what is done by this print info method, which is a public method. And I forced this print info method to reveal the private information by printing like this. And it will print all this because all this private and protected is accessible by this print info method. And I got the result. But using this object, if I try to get the value of the ID, I'm getting error. It is telling that it has no attribute ID. Why it is telling that? Because this is private. So in this way, I cannot access it. Since it is private, I cannot use s1 dot the name of the variable to access it. But other variables I was able to access. s1 dot name I did. So David I got. s1 dot underscore roll number I did. ABCD1 I got. Whatever I have initialized. So this is the idea.
1 minute. 1 minute.
Yeah.